What's up, everybody, and welcome to the X's and O's. This one is for UFC 302's main event between Islam Makhachev and Dustin Poirier for the lightweight championship. Guys, when we look at the month of June, there are a lot of important fights on the horizon, and it starts and stops with this one from the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey, between Poirier and Makhachev. This really could be the last ride for Dustin Poirier. He is putting everything into this, but he has one heck of a hill to climb and taking on the pound-for-pound #1 fighter inside the UFC right now and really in the world in Islam Makhachev. So this is a non-biased breakdown. I'll go ahead and link my playlist down below to other X's and O's videos that I've done. This is going to be an in-depth breakdown. We're going to break down the tail of the tape, go into the tactics, and how I see the fight playing out if each guy were to win and what each guy is going to have to implement in order to get the job done come fight time. So let's first start with the tail of the tape here between Poirier and Makhachev. Obviously, when we look at the records here, Makhachev, that one loss, other than that, getting knocked out, the guy's been pretty dominant, right? In the first matchup with Volkanovski, we saw a close competitive fight. Outside of that, it's been pretty much sheer domination by Islam. And on the other side, 30-8 Dustin Poirier, a grizzled veteran who's just really cut his teeth in the sport, man. He's been around for such an extended period of time. He's known for having some of the best boxing we've ever seen inside the UFC. He's known for getting it done with his hands. You know, the Diamond, the nickname really is a great, just a great thing when it comes to Poirier, a way to describe him. Just a guy that, from the Fightville documentaries, all that he's been through, and then Islam Makhachev, man, just as dominant as he has been, he's just been a real problem for everybody that he's been in there with, and he has really elevated his game, which we're going to get into when we get into the Islam side of things. But let's first start with, when we look at this, height, very similar. All the measurables are very close. Obviously, Poirier, 2-inch reach here. Other than that, measurables are very similar. So I don't think that that's going to have too much of a factor. But when we get into Dustin Poirier, this is a guy, there's no mystery in how he's going to have to probably win this thing. And that's either by knocking Islam out or catching him in some sort of guillotine Hail Mary that I don't think is the most likely, obviously. But with Dustin Poirier, 16 wins by coming by way of knockout, 7 by submission, 13 first-round finishes. That's pretty spectacular. Every time Dustin fights, man, every fight is almost like a controlled car crash, right? When we talk about Justin Gaethje, we're talking about a guy who, it's always chaos. Where with Poirier, there is chaos, but it seems a little bit more controlled at times than what we see with Justin Gaethje. And I think that the technicalities of Dustin Poirier are something that are going to have to be on display in order for him to get this thing done. Because like I said, very steep hill to climb for Dustin. But when we get into some of the numbers here, striking accuracy, 51%, 1,724 significant strikes landed. Almost closing on 3,500 significant strikes attempted throughout his career. That's crazy. Takedown accuracy. I don't think we're seeing Poirier shoot for takedowns in this matchup. So I don't think that's too much to worry about there. But right here is kind of where, I want to draw our attention, right? Obviously, this is data. These are just numbers. But when we look at the numbers and the data, they do paint a little bit of a picture for us. Not the whole picture, but some of it. And when we look at this Poirier here, 5.45 significant strikes landed per minute, 4.36 absorbed. Some of that controlled technical chaos that I talk about, where Dustin Poirier is at his best, is when he's able to close you down and he's able to work you up against the fence, square up his hips, and just start to let those combinations go. That's really where Dustin puts guys in a lot of danger. And the key for him in this matchup, he's going to have to implement that, obviously, into his game plan, but he cannot have his back up against the fence. One of the things about Dustin that I think has been a little bit of an issue for him, if you take a look at his most recent outing against Benoit Saint-Denis, yes, he got the win. But inside that first round, we saw what a lot of people were afraid of heading into a matchup with Benoit was, man, if you can close Poirier down up against the fence, you can force him to wrestle, you can back him up, use the fence, to aid the takedowns. You put Poirier in a tough position. And Dustin's one of those guys who accepts being on the back foot. He doesn't mind kind of being the matador, skirting around on the outside, kind of playing that type of game where in a matchup with Islam, he's going to have to be much more forward. He does not want to let Islam dict the pace and just back him up along the fence. While I know Poirier has some of those really good boxing counters that we've seen. We've seen when Michael Chandler had him up against the fence, how he just raises the guard and does such a tremendous job rolling with shots and firing those counter hooks. he's able to really hurt you. But against Islam, you can't just accept being on the back foot the whole time. Now, I will say this, with Poirier, with these numbers here, this is where we see him kind of that avalanche with Poirier. Eddie Alvarez kind of described it as an avalanche. When Poirier lands something, we saw this in the second McGregor fight. He hurts you, and then he backs you up, and then he just starts to let his hands go, man. It's volume punches and bunches. He's just throwing everything he can at you nonstop, and then he's eventually able to get you out of there. And that's really when Dustin is at his most dangerous. When he has you closed down, he's landed a good shot to where he has you rocked, and he could just start letting things go. That's where he's incredibly dangerous. But when we look at this here, 53% significant strike defense, 63% takedown defense. So takedown defense, definitely going to be something Dustin Poirier, I assume, is focusing very heavily on in a matchup with Islam Makhachev. But what I like about Poirier here, when we look at the significant strikes by target, 80% to the head, 9% to the body, 10% to the leg. We've seen Dustin Poirier has a really good calf kick. And with Islam Makhachev being a southpaw, that calf kick is going to be available. We saw him land one early on in the fight against Saint-Denis. We've seen, man, what he was able to do to Conor McGregor with the calf kicks. He can really put you in a world of trouble. I'm going to look for him to try to work that thing in there, because if you're able to beat up that lead leg of Makhachev, you take away some of the explosiveness. It's going to make it a little bit harder for him to shoot in on some of those takedowns. And then again, that damage just adds up and hinders the movement of the opponent. So if you're Poirier and you can take away the base of Makhachev, that would be a huge plus into neutralizing his movement and trying to close him down and start to let some of those boxing combinations go, because Islam Makhachev's not just going to stand in front of Poirier and just let him box with him. That's not at all what Islam's probably going to do in this matchup. I would be shocked if Islam just stands in front of him in boxing range. Like, I don't think we see that. And then when we go down to I always like to look at the past three fights, right? Because when we go back too far, we see a lot of evolution in terms of the fighter, right? They're either a little bit older now, they've adapted their style, they've had some different types of matchups. Like, we've seen some different things. So in these three fights here, right, Poirier, the one thing about Dustin, he's never lost 2 in a row. So when he came into that matchup here, loses to Gaethje, goes out against Saint-Denis, I'm like, man, I picked Poirier to win that fight just because I saw the weakness in the boxing defense of Saint-Denis. And Poirier, man, the guy just doesn't lose two in a row. But when we look at the matchup with Saint-Denis, I think we can draw some of the most comparisons for what we might see against Islam Makhachev in this matchup. A southpaw that has really good strength, really good grappling abilities. And obviously, I'm not saying Saint-Denis is Islam Makhachev, but he does possess some of those similar skill sets that are going to cause problems for Dustin Poirier, because he has got to do everything in his power to keep this fight on the feet, because if this fight hits the floor and he's trying to jump guillotine, it's just a problem, because you're basically essentially accepting bottom position, and it's not very likely that you're going to finish the guillotine, especially on a guy like Islam, who has just incredibly high-level grappling skills. This man has been doing this thing for years. You're probably not catching him in a guillotine. And when you do that, Poirier, you're now accepting bottom position. And one of the worst case scenarios Dustin could find himself in this fight is to be flattened out on his back and have Islam Makhachev in full mount on top of him. That is an absolute nightmare for Dustin. He has to avoid that at all costs. Don't jump guillotine. If it's standing, maybe we kind of go for that there, but trying to hope and pray for a full, for a Hail Mary here on the guillotine, I don't think is the most likely against Islam. When we look at these other matchups, Gaethje, Poirier, or Chandler, these were crazy fights, right? Gaethje, was having a lot of success early on there. Then Poirier started to settle in, started to land him some good shots. And then again, eventually Gaethje just set him up and threw a nasty head kick, was able to catch him. Okay, no harm, no foul. We go back against Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler was having a lot of success with the wrestling. And one of the issues with Michael Chandler, yes, he's very explosive. Yes, he's very powerful, but he gets very tired. And we saw that, and Poirier was kind of able to take advantage of that, take his back. We saw Poirier land some good shots on him in the first round. He was able to hurt Chandler really bad. But again, Poirier has decent takedown defense. But again, against high-level grapplers, these guys have been able to take him down. I'm not saying it's the easiest thing to do, but they have been able to take him down. And I feel like in this matchup, in order for Dustin to get this thing done, he's going to have to work that lead leg of Makhachev, and he's going to have to turn this into a boxing match. If he is not able to do that, he is going to be in a lot of trouble at all times. just against the number one pound for pound high-level fighter that is Islam Makhachev. Not saying the Diamond doesn't have a chance. I just don't think it's incredibly likely that he's able to get this one done. Very, 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 very steep hill to climb. But if he's going to get it done, he's got to keep his back off the fence. He's got to be a lot more forward, turn this into a boxing match. Moving on. Islam Makhachev, right? When we talk about Islam, I mean, there's not much to say other than this guy is top of the food chain, high level, and is just getting better and better every time out. Islam Makhachev, over his past few fights, which became so impressive to me, is how defensively sound he's tightened everything up to be, right? When he's in there against Alexander Volkanovski, Volk's a hard matchup, right? In prime Volk there, you're talking a guy that's shorter, has good power, good strength, used to be 200 and some pounds as a rugby player. He has a very low center of gravity, a lower base. Like, that's a tricky matchup for a taller guy in Islam Makhachev. There were some things with the weight cutting and stuff in that first matchup. I know the second fight, Volk, took the fight on short notice. We have to factor some things in there for both sides. But Islam, nonetheless, has improved every time he's out. He does not take a lot of risks in terms of the striking, which does not open him up as much to be countered. Now, I will say this. His striking has gotten a lot better, not just defensively, but offensively. His setups, the way he likes to throw that left kick, he can work the lead leg, he'll throw it to the body, and then eventually he'll bring it upstairs like he did to Volkanovski. Now, granted, Poirier's a southpaw, so it's going to be a little bit different there. But nonetheless, that left kick is a real weapon of Islam Makhachev. That has kind of been, something that he's been looking forward to setting up. He's got a good straight left hand, and he stays very tight defensively. However, if there's something that he's lacking in this matchup, it's the boxing. And Poirier is head and shoulders above him in a boxing match, or in terms of the boxing. This isn't a boxing match. Islam's not just going to stand in front of him. When we look at Makhachev here, 25-1, 13 fight win streak, 5 wins by knockout, 6 wins by submission. So again, when you're dealing with a guy that has that level of threat in terms of the takedown, the knockout opens, right? Because you're so hesitant, you're reactive. We saw Kamaru Usman sleep Jorge Masvidal in the second matchup between the two. Why? Well, it was a nasty right hand by Usman, but it was the fact that Masvidal, his brain so scrambled, thinking takedown, what's he doing? Just a slight level change, your hands drop, you're not switched on, you're thinking takedown, and then boom, a straight shot comes down the middle and catches you. Like, that's not to say that Islam Makhachev doesn't try to implement something similar in this matchup. Get Dustin reacting, see how hard Dustin's biting on those level changes, and then Makhachev just throws good straight shots down the middle. Maybe he's able to catch Poirier. But when we talk about the numbers here, striking accuracy, 60%, 361 significant strikes landed, 598 significant strikes attempted. That's accurate. Islam Makhachev, I don't think he always gets the credit he deserves for being as accurate and as technical as he is on the feet. He doesn't have the greatest, flashiest striking arsenal, but it's very effective, and he's very good at what he does. Now, the takedown accuracy, 13 takedowns landed, 51 attempted, 61%. Again, take this with a grain of salt, because whenever we see Islam Makhachev get people on the floor, they don't tend to get up. And if they do, he's forcing you to scramble. He's now taking your back. He's putting you in an even worse position. So everything is very high level in terms of the grappling skill set with Islam Makhachev. Everything is so high level. It's, if they're giving you the opportunity to work back to your feet, you have to ask yourself, why is that? What is he doing? Oh, now he's going to sneak behind me. He's going to pull my hand behind my back. Now he's going to take my back. And everything is about advancing to that next position. But when we look at this here, 2.4 significant strikes landed per minute, 1.27 strikes absorbed. That's incredibly low, right? Not a high output for significant strikes landed, but the risk. He's not necessarily a risk taker in terms of the striking. He's very, very safe in terms of the striking, and you see that here with a 1.27. I mean, if all the X's and O's have done, and we've looked at these numbers here, that might be the lowest we've seen. And I know that he's not really putting himself out there to land a lot, but he's staying so safe defensively that the window of opportunity to catch Islam is not that high. So when he does open himself up, it is going to be on Dustin Poirier to take advantage of those exchanges and make them count. Now, when we come over to takedown defense, 91%, I don't think we're seeing Poirier shoot takedowns in this matchup. But when we come down to the significant strikes by target, 68% to the head, 28% to the body, 5% to the leg. Again, mixes it up pretty well. But when we talk about some of the strikes here, that left kick kind of changes. It's either going to go to the leg of Poirier and then probably to the head, considering Poirier's a southpaw. And then when we come down to the recent competition, right, we'll start with Charles Oliveira. What Islam did to Oliveira was very impressive, right? We've seen Charles Oliveira against Poirier. We saw how Oliveira was able to move forward, and he likes to push the pace. We saw Poirier land some really good shots on him. And Oliveira doesn't move his head very much. He doesn't have the best defense. So you saw what Islam was able to do. That straight left hand was available. That check right hook was available. And he was able to find success in that, follow Charles to the ground, and submit him. And that was the key to taking out Charles Oliveira. If you're not afraid to go to the ground with him and you hurt him on the feet, there's opportunity, right? And we saw Islam Makhachev execute a really good game plan against Oliveira, get him out of there. That was incredibly impressive, wins the title, goes out there, takes on Alexander Volkanovski in Australia. Unbelievable performance by both gentlemen. This fight was really close. This was a great matchup. And we saw Islam got pushed, man. And the thing with Volkanovski, he was one of the top pound-for-pound guys at the time. And Volkanovski, like I mentioned, lower base, lower center of gravity, very physically strong, has good striking, has very good movement, and is a very hard guy to track down. And we saw Islam kind of struggle with that. But then in the second time out, you know, it's been a while since we've seen Islam in there. But when he fought Volkanovski the second time, it was supposed to be Oliveira. Volk steps in on short notice. So there's a little bit of an asterisk there because of the short notice appearance of Volkanovski in this fight. But what you got to see was Islam had a perfect game plan for this. They took a look at the first matchup and saw, okay, Volk's reacting heavy when we throw that body kick. Let's set it up. Throw it to the leg, throw it to the body, and then boom, we'll come up high with it. Catches Volkanovski run on the top of the dome, sits him down, gets him out of there. An incredible first-round finish by Islam Makhachev. So the way I see this fight playing out is Islam Makhachev mixing everything together. I think that he is going to try to close down Poirier. He's going to have to do it safely because we even saw Saint-Denis, man. Poirier, yes, he does accept being on the back foot, but he's dangerous along the fence. Yes, it can help you aid the takedowns, but we've seen he likes to set up that straight left hand. He's got a very good counter right hook. We've seen it because he's a right-handed guy, stands in the southpaw stance, so that right hook is actually his power hand, and we've seen him do tremendous damage with that right hook. But if Islam Makhachev's going to win this fight, I do think that he can hurt Poirier on the feet because he's very clean, he's very technical, but I think the grappling of Islam is going to have to be on point in this matchup. And if it is, and he's able to mix things together, he's able to take Poirier down, tire him out, wear on him, make him a little sloppier in the striking, maybe he's able to, take him down, wear Poirier down. Poirier's a little gassed, not as technical on the feet. Makhachev always stays very technically tight, lands a good shot, sits Poirier down, submits him. I think that is how Islam Makhachev would get it done if this fight were to go in his favor. But nonetheless, a lot on the line here for this main event. Poirier, possibly the last time we see him fight Makhachev, looking to continue to hold that #1 pound-for-pound spot and cement his legacy as one of the greatest lightweights of all time, which is what he's working towards. I want to hear from you all down in the comments. Like this video. Comment your prediction below. Do you think Makhachev gets it done? Do you think Poirier gets it done? Comment 302 down below as well so I know you watched the entire thing. Subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. See you next time.